So what I want to do here is kind of load a variety of disks that I've pulled the bits off of, basically into ISO files, and talk through some of what does it look like, how does this work, and how does it work in a couple of different scenarios. So let's start with Star Wars. So here's a rip of the 4K disc, the original Star Wars A New Hope. So when I click on to load the ISO file, and nicely MakeMKV can load the ISO file natively, that's maybe one benefit of ripping to an ISO rather than the folder structure. If it's the folder structure, you kind of have to click in and find like the index file or whatever. If it's an ISO, boom, you just click open and load the ISO. If you are using any DVD or any DVD has any visibility on the system, you might get this error. It's okay, you can disregard it. These tools work fine in tandem with each other. And I should mention, I am running this on my MacBook Pro, M1 Pro 16-inch laptop. So we are using MakeMKV here on a Mac. So once that ISO loads, you see it parsed all this stuff, and down here you can see everything that was skipped, all these playlists basically that were skipped, and we're presented here with 4 playlists on this disk, and they're all the same size, or relatively the same size. We'll get to that in a second. Just going over the UI, those are all checked by default. We'll come back to that. The output folder is the one that was specified in the preferences. On the right-hand side here, we see a properties list and a setting and some information. That's relative to what's selected on the left-hand side. And then there's an option for a profile. I never really touch this. I leave this to default because I don't want it doing any modifications. I want one-to-one bits all the way through. The only other thing of importance here is the MakeMKV button. Once everything is set up, boom, you hit that, and away the tool goes. I can start off here with one of the first challenges that you're going to find sometimes on discs, and it's the fact that there's 4 different versions, right, of Star Wars A New Hope on this disc. How do I know which one is the right one? I can't necessarily even put it in a Blu-ray player or inspect it super easily in this case because of what these differences actually represent. So if I look into the title information as I click on each one of these, notice that they represent a different playlist, and the playlists are represented by their numbers, and a playlist is made of different segments. So if you do go into the actual file structure of the disk, you can track these to specific M2TS files that are within the file structure of the disk itself. You could play those individual M2TS files, you could see what's what. But I'll go ahead and give you the spoiler alert. And this is the case for a lot of Disney and Fox discs, and actually non-Disney and Fox discs sometimes too. And what it is in this case generally, or for Star Wars, it's the opening scroll. The text, right, that starts every Star Wars film. You want the English text if you're an English speaker, but what if you're a French speaker or German or whatever? The multiple playlists here actually represent 4 different like language openings, and Disney does this on many of their discs, where it'll say like Pixar presents, or it'll have some presentation information, title information at the beginning of the film, and it might literally, these playlists might be identically the same, except the English one says presents, and then there's a Spanish presents, and there's a French presents, and a German presents, or however many different language variations are on the disc. In all of my time doing this stuff, the one thing that I have discovered is that 800, I've never seen, let me put it this way, I've never seen a case where 800 is not the English playlist. If we can, here we can immediately kind of check off the ones that we don't want and know by a pretty safe default, right, that we're interested in the 800 playlist. So from there, if I expand this, I can see all of the different elements, the audio, the video, the audio, and the subtitles and such that make up each one of these playlists. So first off, in relative to the metadata of your MKV file, is the file itself will have a name. Most of the time this loads pretty nicely, sometimes it doesn't, but as a matter of my OCD and my process for doing this, is if it loads a name for the movie that I don't like the formatting of, I will change that, and I will write the name of the film in this property, selecting the playlist, change the name of the film to match what I want it to be. You do get the chapters by default in an MKV file, and MakeMKV will do that automatically for you. I can say I can't recall a point in time where I've had to or messed around with modifying chapters or like editing chapters in an MKV or making an MKV. You just take what it gives you. Generally speaking, a playlist is going to have one video segment, and it tells you information here, what's the resolution, aspect ratio, frame rate, and codecs, and so on. Now, I believe I haven't done anything here with Dolby Vision. I'm not really that too concerned for anything that I might make an MKV of for Dolby Vision, because I have a dedicated home theater space where I would largely be consuming any content that I would store this way. It's projection based. Projection doesn't really support Dolby Vision, and who knows if and when it ever may. So be it. But I do understand that now MakeMKV is capable of preserving the Dolby Vision metadata into an MKV file, and depending on your playback device, you may be able to retain and actually playback in Dolby Vision. I have loaded some films where I've seen DV mentioned here, or Dolby Vision mentioned here in the video codec info. Just like for chapters, you don't really have to select anything for video. There's generally speaking one video stream that makes up the single playlist. So where you do have to start making some selections is going to come with the audio. Movies on a disc have multiple audio tracks and multiple languages and so on. So we can see here there's a True HD Surround 7.1 English track that's actually the Dolby Atmos track. It says True HD Surround 7.1 here, but the codec does specify Atmos. Now that has both the lossless audio track as well as the lossy core audio container. I don't rip the core containers. I want one audio track in my MKV file that represents the highest quality audio that file provides. Some people may rip the lossy core audio to an additional track within the MKV file, depending on what devices they're using for playback and such. But to me, I don't do that. Notice here that there is a second English audio track, but it's stereo. This is likely the commentary, and you can have multiple individual audio tracks in an MKV file. So if you want to retain the commentaries, you can do that. Depending on your playback device and software, you would be able to switch between them and switch between maybe the commentary track and the main audio track. I don't keep any of that stuff. For me personally, if I want to consume special features, director commentary, and so on, I go watch the film on Apple TV. iTunes and Apple TV has some of the best special features, support for a wide variety of films, and you don't have to rip it, manage it, access it on a disc or anything. Kaleidoscape has quite a bit of special features as well. So for the purposes of this, it's not of interest to me. Know that if you want to retain it, you've got some extra work to do, because you've got to know which track is it that you want, what's actually in it. You might have to do a lot more, say, digging and research. And it's going to take enough effort just to do one disc at a time through this kind of a process. So keep in mind that the more you try to retain and the more that you try to do with it, the longer it takes you. And now you're spending 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour potentially to process a single disc. And that really adds up in the whole scheme of things. Again, so for me, one audio track, highest quality, English language. I don't need the French, Spanish, or Japanese. And again, because we selected English language in the preferences, English is ticked already for us, and the other ones are unticked. It makes it very easy. One thing that I do though is regarding the name of the audio track that I keep, I do type in a proper designation as the name of the track relative to its codec. So if it's Atmos, I type Dolby Atmos. If it's DTSX, I type DTS:X. If it's a non-immersive DTS, I'll say DTS-HD space MA space 5.1 or 7.1 or 2.0. I like having that because it very allows me to kind of quickly inspect the contents of the MKV file, or if I'm watching it on an Apple TV or whatever device, the name of the audio track shows up in different ways when you might actually be watching the content, and I find it very useful to name it appropriately and have that designation available right off the bat. So again, one playlist, default chapters, default video stream, one audio track that I've renamed the way that I want it to go, and then now let's talk about subtitles. So PGS is the type of subtitle that is on a Blu-ray, either a high definition or a 4K Blu-ray. Pretty much in this video, we're going to talk about ripping from the frame of reference of Blu-ray only. And there's not really any difference structurally in a disc between a Blu-ray disc and a 4K disc when it comes to doing something like this. And what you want, essentially what you want when you're making an MKV of a movie disc, is that when you get the playlist that you want, you know what you're selecting. The best case scenario is there's one English subtitle. Every time I open a disc and I go to make an MKV for it, I'm puckering in my seat, I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm just saying, please, for all that's good and holy in the world, let there be one English subtitle track. And I'll get to why in a moment. Star Wars for the 4K disc, actually, that's the case. And honestly, too, I would say for a lot of the 4K discs that I've done this type of a process for, you often only have the one subtitle track. More often than not, you have the one English subtitle track. And it does make it easy. I think they almost kind of simplified how 4K discs were mastered relative to some of the complexities that were more prevalent in HD Blu-rays. Notice that the subtitle track has two entries. There's the main entry and there's a sub-entry that's listed as Subtitles PGS English Forced Only. So that's where this stuff just completely derails, and it gets incredibly, has the potential to get incredibly challenging. Star Wars A New Hope, Alien Language, Greedo and the Cantina. There's subtitles there that you need as an English speaker to be able to enjoy the movie. Now, I don't retain, when I make an MKV, I don't retain any of the standard subtitles. My goal is to only have the special subtitles that are required for somebody that can listen to watch the movie. So if you're doing this and you have some hearing concerns, or members of your family that have hearing concerns, and you want to actually preserve all of the subtitles and such, you can do that. But if you want the simplest kind of package of everything possible, this is what I do, particularly when there's only one subtitle track. I tick off the main, which will get rid of all of the subtitles for the actual spoken English language, and I leave the forced one on. And I do two other things here. I name it forced, and I change the MKV flag. It'll carry the D for default, which is good, and I add F, which will also trigger MakeMKV to set a special flag in the file indicating that any subtitles that come out of this subset of the subtitle track will be flagged as forced. And if you're playing this in Infuse or different versions of Plex clients, Zapides and whatnot, they will look at the content. They will look to see, are the subtitles in this content flagged as forced? If they are, they will show them automatically. And then you don't have to enable them manually to make sure that you get the right subtitles on the screen for the scenes that you really need them. Now, if you keep all of the subtitles, you can have the subs and the unforced, essentially, and the forced together in the file. But depending on how you master that, keep in mind that you may have to do things manually when you play it back to choose the types of subtitles that you might actually want. So this is how I do it. We don't have anybody audible issues in the family or that we generally watch movies with. So I'm looking for the simplest path to a main movie possible with the minimal set of processing and information. And so that means, again, one playlist, chapters, one video stream, one highest quality audio stream, only the required forced subtitles to go with it when they're necessary. So that's it. If I were to now want to make this MKV file, I can click, and this isn't going to go particularly fast. I'm not going to stick here through the whole process of it. I did access the ISO file off of my NAS, so it's copying the information across the network as it's essentially making the file. Notice our read rate here is up around 16x or so, as represented by their measurement. I'm just going to go ahead and stop this. Note that had I copied that ISO file to this MacBook's SSD drive locally and accessed it locally and went to make the MKV locally, I think I've seen the fastest up around like 250x. It's basically fast enough that you might as well just sit and wait for it to be done versus walking away and coming back when it's finished. In any case, if this had finished, what you would have seen is that there would have been no forced subtitles in this movie. There was nothing, Greedo's subtitles were not actually in the subtitle track. That's because they actually burn them into the image in the video stream. So that's right off the bat one of the ways that the mastering of the disc can swerve you, in that you might even think that there should be subtitles necessary. However, that's not even always the case. They might actually put the required subtitles directly into the video stream, and then they're not kept in a separate track. They're not kept in a separate part of the MKV file. And that's actually the case for all of the Star Wars 4K release discs that I've seen so far. Jabba's Language and Return of the Jedi and so on. It's all burnt in already, and it's natively in the video stream. So if you make your MKV, you click to retain the forced subtitles available in the single English subtitle track. If there were any in there, MakeMKV will keep them. If there are none in there, then MakeMKV will notify you when it's finished, and there will be no subtitles in your resulting file. That part works really great, and again, it will, if it needs to, it will apply the proper flags. So let's take a look at another one. Here's the Dark Crystal. So notice as we open this one up, this was the 4K disc. As I mentioned, we watched this just recently with our kids and really didn't enjoy it. But in any case, there's no multiple playlist here. So this is also the best case scenario. You have MakeMKV parse the contents of the disc. You've set your threshold for the size, the length of the playlist high enough that it obscured everything else. One playlist, one movie entry, nice and easy, best case scenario. There's our chapters, there's the name of the movie, there's one video stream, and I would do the same things that I mentioned before here. Check off the core audio, rename my track to be Dolby Atmos, which is what's on this disc. But notice now, we have four subtitle tracks that are in English, quite a few more, including the non-English ones. So what the heck do those 4 subtitle tracks represent? This movie actually doesn't have any subtitling in it, nothing that's forced anyway. This is pretty common, and I honestly, I don't even have an explanation for it. But what I can say is that sometimes the way the disc is authored, the way the information is presented, there will be replicate subtitle tracks. Sometimes you will, oftentimes actually, you might see 2 subtitle tracks, and what they actually represent is subtitles that you might play that just contain the verbalization of the movie. And then there's another type of subtitle, which I believe is called SDH, which has the more contextual information in the subtitle. So if somebody coughs or gasps or laughs, it'll say gas, laughter, right? It'll add contextual information about what's happening in the scene, along with having the subtitles for the speech. So, right, it's helping to serve for the enjoyment of watching the movie for folks at different levels of hearing capability and so on. The other thing that you might sometimes see is there could be subtitle tracks for the director's commentary. And you have to be able to sort all of this stuff out so that you choose the minimal set of stuff that really matters, that you really want to have in your MKV file. So how do you do that? Well, what I usually do with my process for doing this is when I don't know what's in here, is I will leave everything checked, all of the main English subtitles checked, and all of the forced ones checked, and I will make the MKV. Then I use another tool. That tool is called Subtitle Edit, which unfortunately doesn't have a Mac version. However, there is a Windows version, and I have a Windows on ARM VM here on my MacBook. And what you can do is after you have the MKV file, you can open the MKV file in Subtitle Edit. It will give you a pop-up allowing you to select from like which track do you want to load. Maybe a minute or so later, it will have parsed that file, and it will give you a list with the time codes and the text of all of the subtitles in that given subtitle track. In these cases here, where MakeMKV, maybe there was some forced stuff in one of these, by leaving the double boxes checked, you'll get an independent subtitle track for the main one, and it will either make or exclude a specific additional track for the forced ones in that one. So let's say, just for sake of argument, that all 4 of these main subtitle tracks had something forced inside of them. The resulting MKV will have 8 subtitle tracks. If only one of these main subtitle tracks had forced content inside of it, then I would have 5. I'd have the 4 main ones and 1 forced. You need to drop your MKV file into Subtitle Edit and open up each one independently and look at it. And you can tell right away what's the regular subtitle track, what's the subtitle track that has the contextual information embedded in it, what's the subtitle track that might be related to a director's commentary and so on, and then which one actually may have the legitimate forced content in it. Once you know that, you can come back to MakeMKV and you can say make the proper selections, right, for what you want to keep. So let's say, just for sake of argument, the Dark Crystal had forced subtitles necessary to watch the movie in the second subtitle track. I would check everything else off. I would leave that second forced one on. I would do my normal naming, and very important, set the F flag, DF, default and forced, and I would go forward and make my MKV. In this case, again, specifically in the Dark Crystal, there were no subtitles necessary to keep to watch the movie. There was contextual and I think some commentary, or actually this one was contextual. So but they were duplicated. Duplicated subtitles for the main movie language and duplicated subtitles for the contextual version of them. Why? I don't know. If you know something about disc mastering, please sound off. Let's take a look at another one. Here's Black Widow, 4K disc release. So this was a Disney disc, notice, but there's only an 800 playlist. They didn't do different openings or whatever for this movie. And here's a good example where I like to rename the movie. So Marvel Studios, Black Widow, Ultra HD in all capitals. That's not for me. If I was going to rip this, I would retitle this to be Black Widow. If I expand it, so we have True HD, we have the core, turn off the core. Here's probably some director's commentary, turn it off. And notice here we have 2 subtitle tracks, one up above and one below. This movie actually does have a limited content of 4 subtitles in it. There's some Russian language. I actually haven't watched Black Widow yet. I'm behind. My geek cred is failing me. I'm behind on my Marvel movies. I need to catch up on those. But in any case, there's some Russian language in here, and it is embedded not into the main one, but I believe this is a case where, and this is common too, where the actual minimal set of subtitles that you need to watch the movie aren't necessarily always forced in a larger subtitle track. They may actually be in a separate main subtitle track without a forced flag on. So I would do the same thing here. I would keep the second subtitle, the main track, not the forced piece this time, but I would still name it forced and I would put the flags on it, because that way when I play it back, whatever device I'm using and such, it would hopefully catch it and display it, and I don't have to go into the menus and turn the subtitles on. So you kind of have to know the ins and outs of this, and it goes back to I'll call it my famous statement, right? That I think a lot of the people making MKVs, setting up Plex, doing all this stuff, they've got wrong information in their server. They miss subtitles. They're missing important elements of what they actually ripped, because the complexities of this stuff, it's just a pain. And again, if you want to know for sure, the only real way to know for sure is to make an MKV with everything turned on and go to another tool like the Subtitle Edit and inspect them one by one by one. So going back to a comment that I made earlier in this video, that's why I hope, I pray and I hope that if I put a disc in and I'm going to make an MKV, please let there be one playlist. Don't let me have to sort through them and figure out which one I actually need. Please let there be one subtitle track. That way I only have to worry about what may or may not be in the forced portion of that. Because if there's one subtitle track, you can be 99.999% sure that's all of the subtitles for the movie itself. I don't know if it's a requirement or what, but you're rarely going to see a commercially mastered Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray that doesn't have a full subtitle set for the main movie itself. And if there's only one main track and there are forced titles in that film, you can be guaranteed that MakeMKV can grab them out of this subset piece. So let's take a look at another one, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This one, it has subtitles you need because the apes are signing, right? The apes are signing to each other. And this is a Fox disc. It follows the Disney structure. There's an 800 playlist and an 801. I would grab the 800. Let's take a look at this one. So Rise of the Planet of the Apes. We have a DTS Master Audio 5.1 mix in here. We have a couple of additional Dolby Digital stereos. There could be multiple director's commentaries. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 English subtitle tracks. So how do you do it? Make the MKV, pull them all. I can tell you that the legit way to make an MKV of this movie is to have 10, you need 10 subtitles. There are 10 instances of apes signing to each other throughout the movie that you would want to be able to retain to understand what they're saying when you watch it. And I don't remember offhand where these ones actually lie. I think technically if you rip this with all 8 of these checked, you'll find 2 different ways to get the 10 subtitle track. I believe it's forced in track 1, and it might even be separate in like track 2. But I'm not here to tell you what to do for a given movie. I just want to give you the information so that you know you have a process and you understand what you're dealing with. One more real quick. Let's take a look. This is Ride Your Wave, G-Kids anime. I really like the Ghibli and the stuff that like G-Kids and Shout Factory and stuff puts out. In any case, 1, 2, 3 subtitle tracks. Spoiler alert, you need the ones in the bottom. The bottom track, if I recall correctly, on a lot of these anime-ish type things or type movies and releases, will put the subtitles you need unforced into a discrete subtitle track, oftentimes at the last one. But again, you don't know. You got to rip them all. Make that MKV. And this is why, again, for this or for Planet of the Apes or whatever, rip the ISO, put the ISO on your local hard drive with a super fast SSD, check all this stuff on, make the MKV. It makes making it so much faster. It makes loading the subtitle tracks in the subtitle edit program so much faster. And then once you figure out which one you need, you come back, right? You delete that first MKV file you made that had all the stuff in it, and you structure the one appropriately that you're looking for, and then you make it again. And usually it's a two-step process, two-step iterative process. Sometimes you may find you want that as you're eliminating subtitle tracks, you're trying to hone in on making sure you have the right thing, that you may need to do it 3. I don't think I've ever had to do it more than 4 times for a given film. Again, just indicative of how, just what a pain this is. But if you want to do it and you want to do it right, this is what you need to do.